Another iterative method based on the similar ideas as policy iteration method is value iteration. A main difference between value iteration compared to policy iteration is that in this method, there is no explicit policy being maintained. Instead, the focus is on just finding the optimal value function. So at every iteration k, the method improves the estimate of the current estimate of the optimal value vector by using a similar operations as we saw in the policy iteration method. As the iterations go on, the estimate of the value vector will converge to the optimal value vector. And once the method has the optimal value vector, the optimal policy can be found as the maximizer of this expression for every state. One advantage of value iteration method is that note that it never needed to explicitly compute the value of a policy using the inverse operation that we did earlier. This can be useful because computing this inverse can be a time-consuming process, especially when the number of states is large, so that the matrix is a S by S large matrix. On the other hand, value iterations can take much longer iteration to converge, because it is possible that you might be changing the value vector while you're not changing the policy. Another iterative method based on a similar ideas as policy iteration method is the value iteration method. A main difference between value iteration from its counterpart policy iteration is that in value iteration there is no explicit policy being maintained. Instead, the focus is on finding the optimal value vector. So it maintains a current estimate of the value vector, and in every iteration it improves that estimate by using an operation similar to the policy iteration method. As the iteration proceeds, the estimate of the value vector will converge to the optimal value vector, and at that point the optimal policy can be found by choosing the actions that maximizes this expression for every state. An advantage of value iteration method over policy iteration is that here you're not explicitly computing the value of a policy by using an inverse matrix formula as we did before. Not requiring to compute this inverse is useful because this matrix can be a large S by S matrix if the number of states is large. On the other hand, value iteration can take more iterations to converge as compared to policy iteration method, because the value vector may keep changing even when the underlying policy is not changing.